Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhigyaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Sargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukadamrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the 48th chapter of the 10th Skandha of Bhagavatam. So we saw Uddhava going to Vrindavan and then coming back and reporting to Krishna everything that he witnessed there. So now Shuka Brahma Rishi continues after talking to Uddhava. Then Krishna proceeds to keep the word he gave to two people. So if you remember, as he entered Mathura from Vrindavan, there was a hunchback woman who is called Trivakra, and she gave Krishna nice pastes and ointments and so on when he asked for it. So when he entered Mathura, as we may recall, first Krishna sees a washerman who also has new clothes, but he refuses to give them and he insults Krishna, and for that he gets punished. But then the hunchback woman, who's also a servant of Kamsa, who carries sandal paste and so on for him, when Krishna asks her, she willingly gives. So Krishna tells her that I will come, and because she asks Krishna to come to her place, Krishna tells her that I have some business to finish. After that, I will come to your place. So there we already saw how the one who is ready to offer everything he has got to Krishna, to Bhagavan, he is realized the purpose of life, whereas the one who thinks it's mine, he is punished. And that's why the washerman was punished, and Trivakra, the hunchback woman, was rewarded. So she was told that Krishna said, I'll come and visit your place after some business is done, which is killing Kamsa, re-establishing the throne of Mathura with Ugrasena, bringing back the Yadu clan, all the rest which has been accomplished in due course. The other person Krishna gave a word is Akrura. As we may recall, Akrura also brought Krishna and Balaram in his chariot, and as soon as they entered Mathura, he invited them home. And Krishna told him also that I will come to your place after some business is done. So both of those people, the hunchback woman Trivikra and Akrura, will be paid a visit because Krishna keeps the word. One of the names of Krishna is the one who always keeps the word. So these are all ways to recognize and live our life too. If we give a word, it has to be honored, and Krishna sets the example here. So he first goes to Trivakra's house, and Trivakra, this hunchback woman, as we may recall, she was made straight. So she has got a very beautiful face, but her body was crooked. But Krishna bestowed her the benediction already by stepping on her toe and straightening her body in one instant. And she became suddenly a very attractive woman. And she was immediately drawn to Krishna. And Krishna said, I'll come later. So Krishna knows that she is pining to be with Krishna. So Krishna honors the word he gave. So he goes to her house along with Uddhava. And when he goes there, he sees that the house is very beautifully decorated. There is all kinds of articles, decorations, pearls, canopies, incense, lights, perfumes, and all the rest. And as soon as Krishna comes there, she is very happy to receive him. She has got many female companions. So all of them rise up. They all come and welcome Krishna and Uddhava, and they offer Krishna a very beautiful seat. Krishna sits there, and Uddhava is also offered a seat. But Uddhava is a very reverent devotee of Krishna, so he never sits next to Krishna. He sits on the floor. He touches the feet, puts it on his head as a mark of respect, and then he sits on the floor. So we already saw how Uddhava, even unlike Arjuna, who is a dear friend of Krishna, who sits along with Krishna, who takes liberties with Krishna, who was truly in Sakya Bhava, whereas Uddhava, even though he is a friend, he is very reverent and he always considers himself only a devotee of Krishna, so he sits on the floor. So now the lady, Trivakra, she is so excited that Krishna has come, so she goes and decorates herself. She wants to present herself in the most beautiful way. So she goes and wears beautiful jewelry, garlands, perfumes, and all the rest. And then she approaches Krishna with very shy looks. And all she wants is the embrace of Krishna, because that is the highest benediction she is pining for. Just as all the gopis pined for this, Trivakra also pined for the same. So Krishna calls her and sits her next to him, and then he holds her hand and he gives her a hug. So here Shuka Brahma Rishi says that unlike the gopis were so devoted to Krishna, they had no other thought of Krishna right from the time Krishna was born in Vrindavan, and they pined for him. Whereas this Trivakra, she did only one thing. She happened to meet Krishna in the streets of Mathura, and she gave him what he asked. And that was enough for her to get this rare privilege and honor of being next to Krishna in an embrace. So she is so blessed. She feels the touch of Krishna on her, in her chest, in her eyes, in her entire body, and she is so thrilled, and she holds him, and she is so ecstatic. So one can imagine how the touch of Krishna would be transporting her to ecstasy because of the magnetic and magical touch that Krishna has, and therefore she secured that warm embrace of Krishna through a simple act of giving him the sandal paste he asked for. And yet, she was also not on the same platform as the gopis, so she had the desire to keep Krishna with her in her place for a long time. So she said, Krishna, will you just stay here and be with me? And of course, this is not something the gopis ever ask for. The gopis were always only wanting to serve Krishna but not possess him, whereas this Trivakra, she still had a bit of pettiness to possess Krishna, and therefore Krishna smiled and just said, I will meet you later, and then granting her the boon that she will always remember him and he will come and see her later. He goes with Uddhava, returns back to his palace. So, in this way, a simple woman who was a hunchback servant was bestowed the grace of Krishna's company because of one pious act. Then Krishna next keeps the word he gave to Akrura, as we said. So he goes with Balaram and Uddhava to visit Akrura. Akrura is, of course, overjoyed. As soon as he sees Krishna come from even a great distance, he is ecstatic. He rises up from the seat. He goes and warmly welcomes them and embraces both Krishna and Balaram. Then he recognizes that, oh, Krishna and Balaram are the supreme being and the expansion of the supreme being. Therefore, he falls at their feet. So he first embraces them because he is their uncle. He is senior in age. Then he falls at their feet too because he considers himself a devotee. Then he washes their feet with water and then takes the water and sprinkles on his head, and then offers them articles of worship such as garlands and jewels and water and robes and all the rest. And then he bends low with humility and he addresses Krishna and Balaram. He says very prayerfully, he says, we are so fortunate that the sinful Kamsa has been slain by you and the right kingdom has been established in Mathura. So as we know, Akrura was in the kingdom of Kamsa. He had not left Mathura because of the hope of this very event of Krishna coming back. And so he was fortunate to, in fact, be an instrument in bringing Krishna and Balaram back to Mathura. And now he is fortunate that his erstwhile master, Kamsa, who was evil, has been killed. And therefore he offers gratitude for that. And then he addresses Krishna and Balaram and he says, You are both, in fact, Prakriti and Purusha. So we saw Uddhava say the same thing to Nanda when he went to Vrindavan. Akrura says the same thing. He addresses Krishna and Balaram and says, Krishna is the supreme being and Balaram is the expansion, which is Prakriti or nature. And therefore, you both are the efficient and the material cause of this universe, and there is no other cause other than you. He says, Yuvam Pradhana Purushau Jagad Hetu Jaganmayau Bhavadbhyam Navina Kinchit Paramasti Nacha Aparam. He says there is no other cause apart from you, no material cause, no efficient cause of this universe other than you, because you are both the spirit and the material energy, Purusha and Prakriti. And then he says further, O Krishna, after bringing forth this creation, you enter this creation as the indwelling awareness and as the intelligence that pervades this whole universe. You are perceived in numerous forms. He says, Atmasrishtam idam vishwam anvavishya swashaktibihi iyate bahuda brahman shruta pratyaksha gocharam. He says, Atmasrishtam idam, you create this universe out of your own being, Vishwam, then Anvavishya, then you enter that through your own power. And you are available through sight and sound as well. So, what he beautifully points to here is all aspects of the Supreme Being. The source of the universe is the Supreme Being as pure consciousness that expands as the universe, and then within the universe, every aspect of what is seen and heard is an expansion of the same Supreme Being. And what dwells within the hearts of all beings as pure awareness is the Supreme Being. So he says everything is you alone, Krishna, just as the five elements, space, air, fire, water, and soil, appear in various forms in all kinds of places and beings. Similarly, you as the pure self appear in numberless forms. So many forms you take and appear, and everything is happening because of your gunas, the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. Through that, you create, preserve, and absorb the universe back unto you. But you are not touched by these gunas, and therefore you are always pure consciousness. And then he also says the body and all the other adjuncts, such as mind and intellect and so on, when we inquire into, we find them to be ephemeral, and only truth is the pure spirit, which is the Atma. And therefore, he says the pure spirit that you are is the essence of this universe, and what appears as the mind, the body, the various material aspects are simply appearances, and these appearances are all temporary in nature. They are all your own expansion, but they are temporary, and the essence of them is pure awareness that you are. And therefore, as pure awareness, there is no bondage or liberation for you. You are always free as the Supreme Being. The illusion of bondage and the illusion of seeking liberation is only for the apparent mind, which thinks itself to be a separate entity. But in reality, if we inquire into it, the mind does not exist as a separate entity. All it is there is the appearance as an expansion of your own energy, and all that remains is you alone. And you appear every time there is any harm or any obstruction to the Vedic creed. So the Vedas have set out the creed of this highest wisdom, and whenever there is any obstruction to that, you appear. And now at this time, you are born in the house of Vasudeva along with Balaram, your own manifestation, your own expansion, in order to remove the burden of earth. And therefore, we are also blessed, and I am especially blessed because you have taken the trouble of visiting this house, putting your lotus feet in my house, and by these waters that have washed your feet in my house, this house is sanctified, and these waters are purer than Ganga, they sanctify the whole universe. And therefore, he says, who would seek anyone other than you? If anyone has even an iota of wisdom, he would not go toward anyone other than you because you are so truthful of speech, friendly, grateful, and loving to all your devotees, and grant all the desires of your pure devotees and bestow them the highest wisdom of your own self. He says, Kaha panditastwadaparam sharanam samiyad bhakta priyad ritagiras suhrat kritagya. So here he points out, first of all, that why would anyone who is even a little wise go to anyone other than you, because you are the friend of your devotees and you keep your word. So he here points out how Krishna told Akrura that I'll come to your house, and he kept the word and came to his house without Akrura ever asking again. So he says, you keep your word. That's why he says Kritagnyat, the one who is always grateful, one who is friendly, one who is truthful of speech, one who keeps the word, one who grants the desire of all his devotees, and one who bestows them their own self. And therefore, I am so fortunate and so lucky that I have been able to see you in my own house, because your ways are not comprehended even by great yogis and great demigods. So, having come here, please dispel the bondage of illusion that I have in terms of attachment to all the material possessions. So, hearing this beautiful prayer of Akrura, Krishna is pleased. He smiles and he says, according respect to Akrura, because Akrura is much senior in age as his grand uncle, Krishna says, you are actually our senior, so you are like a guru to us, and you are a great friend also. So we in fact need to be protected and taken care by you. And not only that, Krishna glorifies the nature of a true devotee here. He says, truly blessed are souls like you who are always seeking blessedness for others. He says, even the demigods are actuated by self interest. We've seen this many times, how Indra and the demigods, they only act out of desire for heaven and so on. Whereas he says, you act with no other interest except unconditional love. He says, Bhavadvida Mahabhaga Nishevya Arhasattama Shreyaskamir Nirbhritar Nityam Devaha Swartha na Sadhavaha. So these devas, these demigods, they act out of self-interest. They want heavenly abode, they want powers and so on. Whereas a true devotee like you, sadhu, he has no self-interest. You act only out of unconditional love. Therefore, Krishna says, even more than sacred waters of the rivers, even more than the deities in the temples, it is the darshan or the seeing of such pious beings as you that instantly purifies one. So, this is the highest glorification of Bhagavatas. So, Krishna himself glorifies his devotee Bhagavatas as the highest source of purification, more than even temples and deities, more than even holy rivers. Being associated with a pure devotee is the greatest source of purification. Krishna says, Nahi ammayani tirthani na deva mritchilamayaha te punanti urukalena darshanadeva sadavaha. See, all these places like temples and holy rivers, they all purify only over time. This was said even in the very first Skandha, and this is mentioned because Krishna says this thing here. That's what was repeated in the first Skandha. But here Krishna says all of them only purify over a course of time. Whereas Darshana Deva Sadhavaha, saints like you, purify just by one darshan, one moment of association. And therefore he says, you are the foremost of our friends. Now we have only one task for you. And now Krishna asks Akrura for a favor. He says, his cousin. So now Krishna remembers the cousin who is Yudhishthira and the Pandavas. So he says, our cousins Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, they are all in Hastinapur under the kingdom of Dhrtarashtra, and Dhrtarashtra is the ruler who is very partial to his own sons Duryodhana and so on. Pandu has died. So the story here is Dhritarashtra is the ruler of the kingdom of Hastinapur, because his brother Pandu, who is in fact the rightful heir to the throne, had died. And because Pandu had died and his sons were too young, who are Yudhishthira and the Pandavas, Dhritarashtra was installed as the king. But Dhritarashtra, because of attachment to his sons Duryodhana and so on, wanted to hold on to the throne and give the throne to Duryodhana wrongly, instead of what is right would have been to give the throne to Yudhishthira when he became old enough. So, because of this, Yudhishthira and the Pandavas were taken out, or their rightful throne was taken away from them. And not only that, Duryodhana constantly tried to kill them so that there will be no threat to the kingdom, and therefore they were constantly threatened, and yet they were very pious and they didn't want to retaliate. So they were going through a lot of suffering, and their mother Kunti, who is now widow because Pandu died, she's going through all the suffering. So Krishna remembers all them, and he says that the boys, the Pandavas, are all living in a miserable condition because their father has died. Their mother is very sad, Kunti, who is our aunt. So Kunti is actually the sister of Vasudeva. It was already mentioned in the ninth Skandha. Vasudeva's sister is Kunti, and therefore Kunti's sons, who are Pandavas, are Krishna's first cousins, Arjuna and so on. So Krishna remembers his first cousins and his aunt Kunti. He says, Uncle Pandu has died, and our aunt Kunti is a widow, and she is very much in misery because her sons are being put through so much torture, and the feeble minded Dhritarashtra is blind, both literally and figuratively, because he is attached to his sons and he is treating his nephews quite badly. Therefore, you please go to Hastinapur and find out what's the situation there. He says, Hastinapur, all this is going on, so you have to go there and find out what's going on there, how in fact the Pandavas are being treated, find out and come. So accordingly, Akrura says, I shall do that, and Akrura is happy to obey the order of Krishna and go to Hastinapur. So we enter the next chapter 49, where Akrura goes to Hastinapur, and after he goes to Hastinapur, he meets with Dhritarashtra, and he is accompanied by all the great beings there: Bhishma, Vidura, Kunti, Drona, Karna, Duryodhana, Ashwatthama, Yudhishthira, and the four Pandavas: Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, and so on. Everyone inquires his well being and he inquires about them, and he decides to stay there for a few months to find out the situation as Krishna had asked him to, how Dhritarashtra is treating the sons of Pandu, how they are doing, and so on. So, both Kunti and Vidura is the other brother of Dhritarashtra, who is a very pious brother, and we have already seen him in third Skandha in detail. So, Vidura, along with Kunti, tell Akrura of all the evil that Duryodhana has been doing in terms of administering poison and trying to kill the Pandavas, and Dhritarashtra being blind and listening to his son, who is envious of their majesty and their strength and their prowess and the way the people love them and so on. And Kunti especially approaches Akrura and she cries. She's full of tears. She says, Do I am in such misery now because I am alone. My husband has died. My sons are being put through all this torture. Even though they are princes, they are going through such misery, and I am not able to do anything about it. So she asks very fondly, do my parents and my brother Vasudeva, do they remember me? They are all there in Mathura. Do my nephews Krishna and Balaram remember me? And especially Krishna, who is so fond of his devotees, does he remember me? She says very sweetly, Bhratreyo Bhagavan Krishna Sharanyo Bhaktavatsala. He says, the one who is Bhaktavatsala, one who is always fond of his devotees, does he remember me? So even though she is the aunt of Krishna, she is so devoted to Krishna already. And we have seen in the first Skandha already the most beautiful prayers of Kunti, where she very beautifully says, Every time you give me suffering, I remember you more and more. So please give me more suffering, is how she prayed to Krishna towards the end after the war is over and so on. But now we are in the very beginning, this particular incident, well before anything has started. And here also, true to her prayer, then her suffering makes her only think of Krishna. So she says, Bhagavan Krishna, I only remember him, and I remember Balaram. Do they remember me? And she says, will they come here or will they do something to console me? Because I feel like I feel like a doe in the midst of wolves, like a she deer when it's in the midst of wolves, how it will feel. That's the way I'm feeling in the middle of all these Kauravas. And so she offers a very heartfelt prayer to Krishna directly, hoping that Akrura will carry this prayer to Krishna. She says, Krishna Krishna Mahayogin, Vishwatman Vishwabhavana, Prapannam Pahi Govinda, Sisubhishcha Avasiditam. She says, O Krishna, O Govinda, O great yogi, O soul of the universe, O savior of all, please protect me because I'm here suffering with all my children too. And there is no one other than you who is the refuge for the one who is suffering. She says, Na anyat tava padam bhojat pashyami sharanam nranam. There is no other refuge, no other asylum other than your lotus feet, and therefore I only pray to you, Krishna. She says, Namak Krishnaya Shuddhaya Brahmane Paramatmane Yogeshwaraya Yogaya Twamaham Sharanam Gataha. She says, I surrender unto you, O Lord Krishna, the pure supreme Brahman, the self of all, the Lord of all yogas, the very embodiment of yoga, the source of all wisdom. I surrender unto you. So, in this way, it is said she remembers Krishna in a very heartfelt way and she cries. It says, Iti anusmritya swajanam Krishnam cha jagadishwaram prarud dukkita rajan bhavatam prapitamahi. So, Shuka Brahma Rishi tells Parikshit, who is listening, that this is your own great grandmother. So, as we can recall, Kunti's son is Arjuna and Arjuna's grandson is Parikshit. Therefore, Kunti is his great grandmother. So, Shuka Brahma Rishi says, now this is directly connecting to the family of Parikshit. So Parikshit is being told, so this is your great grandmother who cried in a heartfelt way, thinking of the beloved Krishna. Akrura and Vidura, of course, consoled her and said, not to worry, Kunti, because your sons are all no ordinary beings. They may be going through a lot of misery and challenges, but they will certainly come victorious. And of course, that is prophetic and that will be true. And everybody knows that righteousness, dharma will prevail. But right now, because of all the challenges, Kunti is suffering. So, meanwhile, Akrura, recognizing all this, this is what he wanted to ascertain. He finds all this, then he approaches Dhrtarashtra and warns him one last time. Of course, Dhrtarashtra is in no mood to listen to anything, but Akrura does his duty and he says, O Dhrtarashtra, you have ascended the throne because your brother Pandu has died. Now you should use this opportunity to rule very piously and very righteously, and then you will attain prosperity. But if you are acting otherwise, if you are acting in a petty way, then the world will condemn you. And remember one thing, nobody is permanent. You are so attached to your sons, but your sons will leave you, your wife will leave you, why your own body will leave you. Nothing is permanent. And he says, everyone is born alone, dies alone, and he reaps the fruits of his deeds also alone. He says, Ekav prasuyate jantur, eka eva praliyate, eko anubhunkte sukrit, ekameva dushkritam. So he says, whether you do good deeds or bad deeds, you alone will reap the fruits. None of your sons will reap that. Just as you are born alone and you will die alone, you will alone reap the fruits. Everyone else, like your sons, they will be there with you only for their own selfish interest, and they will desert you when your time comes. When you are about to die, everything will desert you. Your riches will desert you, your sons will desert you, your kingdom, all the pleasures you have accrued, everything will desert you. The only thing that will go with you is the load of sins that you are carrying, and that will take you straight to hell. Therefore, recognize that this world is simply a dream and it is not worth getting so attached to, and do the right thing in peace. So, very powerful instructions given by Akrura to Dhrtarashtra. He says, Tasmat lokamimam rajan swapna maya manoratham vikshya Yam Atmana Atmanam Samashanta Bhava Prabho. He says, O Lord, O King, he addresses with respect because Dhritarashtra is, after all, the emperor of Hastinapur. So he says, O Emperor, please recognize that being attached to your sons and doing the wrong thing will not serve you. They will all desert you. You will only face the consequences. Therefore, recognize that this whole world is like a dream, temporary. Don't be so attached to it. Be in peace and do the right thing. Dhritarashtra listens to all this and he responds very calmly and he says, O Akrura, I hear everything you say. And this is exactly how he responded to Vidura too, as we have seen in the third Skandha. Every time someone offers good counsel, it is not that Dhritarashtra doesn't know. There are two types of people like Duryodhana who outright reject good counsel because they are bent on doing evil things. But what is in a way more sad is people like Dhritarashtra who recognize the good counsel but who are completely unable to follow it. He says to Akrura, he says, I recognize everything you say. It is sounding like nectar. It is a very agreeable counsel, but unfortunately, it doesn't stay in my mind. Right now, it sounds right, but I know that it will go away once I talk to my sons. Just as lightning appears like a flash and vanishes, this is the kind of light this is. So, the light of wisdom has to burn bright forever. But if it's like a lightning that gives a momentary flash of brightness and goes away, that's no use. But Dhritarashtra says that's how it is. Every time I listen to you, I listen to my brother Vidura. Vidura is the youngest brother, as we have seen, who is also very wise. And every time Vidura advises me, or now you advise me, it's like a lightning flashing, and it instantly goes away when my son comes and talks to me. What can I do? Because this is, he says, he resigns to the fate. He says that this is the decree of the Lord. This is the destiny that I am meant to be attached to my sons. I am unable to get out of it. So he expresses his inability, even though he recognizes the wisdom of what Akrura is saying and the wrong path he is going by following his sons. He says, I am unable to do that. So he simply says, I recognize that the Lord is appeared in Mathura. He is now in Mathura, and whatever he is ordained to do is going to unfold. So I simply offer my obeisances unto him who handles all activities of the world. Beyond that, I am unable to change my behavior. So Dhritarashtra, very curious case of someone who recognizes the good counsel, who has the sense to recognize that everything is ordained by the Lord, who offers his prayer to the Lord, and yet he says, I'm incapable of changing myself because of my attachment to my son. So this is a very stark warning for many who are exposed to this wisdom, who even recognize this wisdom but are not able to live by it. So this is what Dhritarashtra represents, which is, in as already mentioned, in a way sadder than the case of even the one who is unable to recognize this wisdom. So it's important to not just listen to this but to live according to this, which Dhritarashtra is not able to. So having known the situation of Hastinapur very clearly, Akrura now returns to Mathura after taking leave of all the people there, including Pandavas, Kunti, and so on. And then he comes to Mathura and he reports to Krishna and Balaram all the things he has witnessed. He stayed there for a few months. He saw all the events there, all the suffering the Pandavas are put through, the crying prayers of Kunti, and the counsel of Vidura, and the position of Dhritarashtra, the evil ways of Duryodhana. All of this was witnessed first hand by Akrura. So he comes back to Krishna and Balaram and he reports everything very clearly to Krishna and Balaram, and thus he has accomplished the mission he was assigned. And with this chapter ends, and also with this ends the first half of Dashama Skandha, 10th Skandha. It is called Purvardha, or the first half, which concludes the portion of 10th Skandha to do with the Leela of Vraja, that is Vrindavan and Mathura. So Krishna is born in Mathura, goes to Vrindavan, does all his beautiful pastimes, comes back to Mathura, does some pastimes in Mathura of killing Kamsa and so on. And now, with this, his stay in Mathura is about to end, and we will see in the second half Krishna moving to Dwaraka, why he moves there, and all the various wonderful pastimes that happen in Dwaraka will begin from the next chapter, which is the second half of 10th Skandha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.